Hey guys, what's up? Happy Monday. Happy Monday. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about how you can stop clenching your glutes and feeling all that tension in your pelvic floor, and what do you even do about it? I think it was last week I had posted a video or a comment talking about how you should check in regularly with your glutes and your pelvic floor and try to figure out if you are clenching or tensing in those muscles, because many times people with impingement are doing exactly that. And that can contribute to a lot more pain. And I did have a lot of questions around, like, how the heck, okay, I recognize that I'm doing this, but how the heck do you not do it so much? And like, what needs to happen? And so I thought it'd be a perfect opportunity to make a video about it, talking a little bit more in depth on it. So first, I just want to talk to you about why that glute clenching, why it happens and why it's not very good. So first things first, it is a really common pattern that I see in most of my patients that have hip impingement. In fact, a lot of times, my patients with impingement also tend to be my people that are a little bit more type A, a little more stressed out, a little more anxious. And I don't say that as a bad thing. It's just kind of the pattern that I have seen. I also fall inside of that group, so I feel like I can say that, because we tend to be the people that are a little bit more on edge, and again, that stress and anxiety, we know that creates a little bit more tension throughout our body, and so our hips and our glutes like to hold on to some of that tension. And again, that tension can kind of lead into a little bit more of the hip pain that you're feeling. The other reason that I see this chronic tension aside from stress is it's a way for your body to create some support and stability around the hip joint. So we know that in hip impingement, one of the big issues is that there's not enough stability around the joint. And so our body craves stability. It knows that it needs stability and it wants stability. And so what happens is it doesn't really know where to get it from. And so it just clenches and tenses everything around the hip joint to be like, okay, I'm stable, here we are. And it's kind of just this like false sense of support, but it's not an effective use of the muscles, and you're not actually stabilizing from the things you should be stabilizing from. And so that can lead to this chronic feeling of needing to stretch, needing to massage, or roll out those areas. And while it might feel better temporarily, it tends to, as soon as you're done and you go back to moving, it tends to come right back, and feel like you need to stretch all over again. And it's because you very likely haven't addressed the root of why you are tight and tense in the first place. So what structurally happens when we clench our glutes? I'm going to actually stand up here because let me give you a little demo. So when we clench glutes, and I actually see this if you guys are dancers at all, if any of you guys are dancers, this is really common in my dancers. But what I tend to see a lot of is this over like tucking this way. So when we, and I'm kind of exaggerating, but when we squeeze our glutes, it essentially puts us into what's called a posterior pelvic tilt. Now, if you've watched any of my videos before about hip impingement, we know that one of the big movement things that happens or that needs to happen is the head of the femur must stay in the center of the socket. And when we clench and go into that posterior butt tuck position, the head of the femur actually presses forward a little bit more. And so it creates more compression or stress to the front side of the joint. So for a lot of people, when I start working with them, one of the areas that I always check to see if it's holding tension is around the back side. And people are usually like, well, I don't have pain there, until I start poking around and they're like, ooh, I didn't realize that was so tight or so uncomfortable. And we tend to find a lot of problems there. So then I'll often kind of test it and do a little bit of soft tissue work there and see what happens. If we loosen it, how does your hip feel? And more times than not, they will say, oh my gosh, my motion feels so much more unlocked. I don't have the pain on the front anymore. But that's so weird because you didn't touch the front. And the reality is we sometimes have to address in a different area than where the pain is. Otherwise, you end up chasing the pain around and it never gets better. So that posterior side is often a big piece of the puzzle in loosening it up and getting more mobility so that there's not so much pressure on the front side of the joint. But again, we have to look at, well, why is it tense and tight in the first place? And if it's because you are chronically tense and tightening, then you have to address that piece of it. The massage, the stretching, it's not going to do much of anything. So it's really important to find the root cause of something. So that being said, if we know, okay, I'm not supposed to clench my glutes, maybe you've identified, like self-identified that yes, that's me. I am a butt clencher. What the heck do you do about it? So step one is usually just being aware of it. And so sometimes that is doing a like body scan, just trying to tell if you're holding tension periodically throughout the day, like checking in with your hips. This is the post I think I put up last week of checking in with your hips and just taking note of, am I tense, am I tight? And simply just then trying to release and relax them. Now, you're going to have to check in with your body all the time in the beginning. You are going to have to set a reminder on your phone, or sometimes I tell people to put a sticky note on their computer if they're sitting working all day. Like, you're going to have to consciously tell yourself, what are my glutes doing? And it's going to take a lot of that before a change actually happens. We talk about diaphragmatic breathing. So learning how to lengthen through the pelvic floor, because our pelvic floor muscles are those hip stabilizers. And so learning and understanding how do you actually physically lengthen those muscles versus constantly, for lack of a better term, doing a Kegel, or like constantly being braced and contracted, but like, how do you actually lengthen and let them go the other way? Because that's just as important, is sometimes it's more important than the contraction piece. So it takes this constant checking in with yourself, this repetition over and over and over again before your body starts to recognize, hey, that's not what I'm supposed to be doing anymore. And so a lot of times it really is just trying to practice that, and your body's always going to want to go back to the path of least resistance, always. And until you teach it that that's not what you need it to do, it's just going to want to keep going back. So that's where the time and the repetition comes in. We can help it along with doing daily practice of diaphragmatic breathing and pelvic floor or hip stabilizer lengthening. We can do some mobilization things to help reduce pain and restore some mobility. But the other key here lies in the strengthening, because if part of the reason, and many times it's because you're clenching because you're trying to find a false sense of support, you have to build the support and the stability within the hip for it to finally recognize, oh, this is what it feels like to be supported versus me just tensing in everything around the hip joint. So some of the repetition now comes down to, so you've got to build an awareness, you have to learn how to lengthen the muscle, and then you have to strengthen it. And the strengthening piece and the stabilizing piece, that's what's going to lock those changes in permanently. Now, does this happen quickly? No, absolutely not. It definitely takes a long time to make this happen. So don't let that frustrate you. I know it can sound frustrating, like, oh, I've got to practice this stuff so much all the time. And I totally understand that that can be really frustrating. But I promise on the other side of it is a hip that's going to feel freer, and it's going to not have pain, and just everything's going to feel better. So stick with it. It takes at least, at minimum, 4 weeks of conscious effort before you start to see a change with these things. Too often, people try it for like a week or two and then get frustrated that it isn't working, and then they stop. And when they do that, they have usually stopped too short of making any lasting changes. And so I always tell people, just keep hanging on, even if you feel like it's not doing anything. Keep hanging on, keep doing what you're supposed to be doing, because just on the other side of that hump is going to be some changes that happen. It just takes our body at minimum 4 weeks to see them, till those changes start to become more quote unquote normal feeling. So I hope that that helps. I know it's not always the best answer. People want like a quick fix, and I totally get that. But I do promise that there is hope on the other side of this, and you can absolutely manage it and not be a chronic butt clencher anymore. You might always have to check in with your body, but it hopefully won't have to be so consistent and so every single moment of every day. You're not going to feel like that's what you're focusing on after a while. So start there. I hope that that helps. As always, if you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and I will get them answered as soon as I can. Have a good day, everybody.